So hello, I'm Dana Gorsolani Mostak, and I'm Associate Professor of Music at Georgia College in Milledgeville. I also have another appointment at Georgia College. I work for the Center for Teaching and Learning, and one of the things I do through my work there is I assist faculty with applying for competitive awards and grants. So Dr. Holmes Davis asked me to do this presentation because of the background I have both in helping people locate and apply for grants, and of course I'm also a musician myself and a former educator who taught in the K through 12 system. So that's kind of the angle that I'm coming from with today's talk. And I'm going to kind of go through a couple of different things in today's talk. I want to talk a little bit about what I think the particular benefits are of applying for grants. I'm going to talk about some of the things that you can do with grant money should you receive it. I'll talk a little bit about the types of grants that are out there. I'll talk about how to locate those grants. And then I'll also talk about what I feel the elements are of a strong presentation, or I'm sorry, a strong grant proposal, if you will. So to kind of begin, so I have just sort of a basic question here, and that is, what do you do when you need funding for resources in your classroom and it's something that's typically not provided? How do you as educators deal with that? Dr. Holmes Davis, do you want to take a crack at that one?
Yes, I think that in general, most educators come out of their own pocket. Or, in some cases, you may be able to make a case to your principal to get, kind of miscellaneous monies.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think there's any one way. Sometimes you just have to be lucky and, the county has a pot of money that you can pick from. But I don't think that there's any one way. There is kind of an uptick recently in either kind of GoFundMe type things or I've seen more and more people that are applying for and getting grants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are all really good points. Certainly teachers pulling money out of their own pockets to provide for students in their classrooms is a pretty common thing, especially for teachers that work in communities with disadvantaged students where they don't have like a large group of parents they could draw from, or if the school is underfunded. These certainly are challenges that I know a lot of teachers out there face in certain communities. But Dr. Holmes Davis is right. Sometimes a conversation with a principal about a cool activity or trip or program or project, sometimes a principal can find funding for those endeavors. Certainly in some districts, if you have parents that are super involved with your music program, they may provide you with some of the resources that you need. And sometimes the broader district has opportunities to get funding for these kinds of endeavors as well. But all in all, these channels can sometimes be difficult. Sometimes funds simply are not available. Sometimes the values and the interests of the educator aren't in alignment with the administrative professionals, and they decide not to provide funding for your endeavors. And then, also another really common scenario is, we know a lot of schools don't have adequate funding for the various things that they need, and simply the money is not available. So it sort of puts the educator in a position of figuring out, well, if I'm not regularly provided these resources and my parents can't provide them and the administration can't provide them and the county or the district can't provide them, what avenues do I have? So I know Dr. Holmes Davis mentioned one that I know a good number of teachers have made use of as of recent, and that is crowdfunding platforms. In a crowdfunding platform, sort of the typical scenario for this is you have your project or you have your list of materials or instruments or something that you need. You usually create some kind of narrative about your project and what you're trying to achieve. Some people make a creative video to go along with theirs. And then it is posted online for a period of time. You usually have a target amount of money you're trying to raise, and then you share it via social media or other channels. And then people who know you or people that don't know you have the option of contributing to your project. So that's certainly one model I know a lot of educators use. And I think there's a lot of positive things about that model, but I also think there's a downside to that model as well, could you maybe share, and even if you haven't done a crowdfunding campaign before, can you share some of the things you think might be positive about that approach to gaining money and some of the or resources, and some of the negative things? Yes, go ahead, Dr. Holmes Davis.
I think a positive is that, it's a good way whenever there seems to be no other way to fund your activities to give your students the best possible education. But I think it also kind of puts your dirty laundry out for the world to see. Now everybody knows that you're not being funded to a point that it allows you to do what you need to do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I also do think for these types of crowdfunding campaigns, there often is a ceiling to what you can raise with them as well. And you're also right, Dr. HD, that in order to encourage people to give money, you kind of need to be very transparent about your situation. And not everybody feels comfortable with putting yourself out there like that, for sure. There are some upsides. I mean, I think, if you have a cool idea, I think it's great for the community to get behind it, and people put in $1 or $5 or $10, and then the project sort of, everyone who contributes a little bit has a little bit of ownership in that project, and feels the satisfaction of knowing that they played a role in creating something big and something really cool and something innovative or interesting or different. So I think there's certainly some value for both the recipient and the giver in that kind of scenario. The only other downside I'll mention is, usually these crowdfunding platforms do take a cut. What the cut is sort of depends on what the organization is. There's some more general crowdfunding platforms, and there are also some specifically for teachers. And I will talk a little bit about that later. But that certainly is an avenue that one could consider. Another avenue for funding that I know, I know a lot of teachers do it because I'm always hit up to purchase wrapping paper and popcorn. So I just know. But I think with your traditional fundraisers, whether it's cookie dough, sheets, mattresses, popcorn's a big one, or whether it's just kind of miscellaneous types of stuff, that type of fundraiser, I see a lot of downsides too. What are some of those downsides of running one of those types of fundraisers?
The one that my husband has run into at his school with mattresses specifically is that, once you kind of, with something, a big item like mattresses, where there's a high price point and then there's a high return to the band, you kind of outshop your population. Once the first wave goes through and they get mattresses, they don't need another mattress next year.
Correct.
The popcorn's a little better because people eat the popcorn, then they want more.
Or and it's good popcorn.
It is good popcorn.
Hey, but the in-service concert, it's like a veritable free buffet.
It is.
Good stuff. I go to the popcorn guy, I go to the cheesecake guy. It's like lunch right there. It's great. But you're right. For something, it's a high priced, item you buy every 10 years. There's a limited number of customers you're going to have, both because it's something people only buy every 10 years. And because with the price point, even if people want to support the school, a mattress could be anywhere between, $500 and $20,000. So the question is somebody ready to make that kind of investment to support a school? And, I think with some of the smaller fundraisers, you're right, Dr. Holmes Davis. And I think, those maybe where it's some kind of consumable. If people like it, they'll keep buying it, which I think has some value. But the other sort of downside I see is, I think the company who's allowing you to do the fundraiser sometimes benefits more than the organization. Now, I don't know what the exact percentages is. It's different for everyone. A lot of it depends on how much you sell or how much the product costs. But, in general, these fundraisers, you might get 30 to 40% of the net sales go back to your institution. So one thing I see as a potential downside is you put in a lot of work, and your organization really only gets a small amount of the money that is raised for that thing. And I think some parents, rather than spending $200 on wrapping paper, they might just want to give $20 to the school because the students will see more of it. I also think, you know, for programs that do a lot of fundraisers as a means to sustaining a program, there's a limit to how much people want to fleece grandma to purchase things throughout the course of a year. So there's also a limit as to how many you could do. You know, it's also can be time consuming to do these kinds of fundraisers, to coordinate kind of the students selling things, to keeping track of things. So it does present a certain kind of labor outside of the regular sort of expectation for teachers to execute these fundraisers and do it well. Okay. So crowdfunding, fundraisers, you know, certainly two avenues to building your program, to gaining materials, new technologies for your classroom. But I see just as many drawbacks as I do positives with those. So how are grants different? Well, grants also require a certain amount of labor on the front end. And unlike a fundraiser, you know you're going to make some money. If you apply for a grant, you may or may not receive that grant. So it's labor that sometimes has no return on investment, where at least popcorn brings some. However, I think grants, or a teacher going out there applying for a grant and receiving a grant, I think that brings another kind of value to a music department and to the institution. So to kind of give you an example, one of the types of grants that are out there, the NEH has various grants for educators. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those grants a little bit later. What do you see might be the benefit if a teacher applies for an NEH grant and receives it? Outside of the fact that you'll get to do something cool at your school, what's the benefit for the educator in your mind?
Sorry, I'm under attack from a dog. I think that, you know, you get to have a little more public professionalism. Like I said, with some of the other things you do, you really have to kind of show that you're not being funded to the extent that you need. Mm-hmm. And with the grant, you have to tell the grant provider that, but you don't have to tell the general public.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, I think through the process of applying for grants, it can allow you to connect with a new network of people that could be beneficial to your career and could be beneficial down the line. I think earning, especially a competitive grant, I think brings a certain level of visibility and cultural cachet to your program, especially if you're in the building phase. You know, I also think, you know, especially for schools that are underfunded or schools that cater to, you know, students, you know, from disadvantaged backgrounds, it also can be a way of leveling the playing field, because it allows students that maybe wouldn't normally have access to certain things have access. So I think as educators, as we commit ourselves to diversity, equity, and inclusion, grant money, and especially since there's a lot of grant money out there for initiatives that speak to DEI, it really could be a way of ensuring that all students in your institution have equal access to resources and opportunities. So I think that's a really powerful incentive as well. And then, of course, the obvious one is, you know, you're getting to develop programming, or you're offering technology or instruments that maybe otherwise your students would not have access to. So I see a lot of positives to going the route of applying for a grant. The only thing I see as kind of a downside of that is, of course, you know, you may or may not receive the grant. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit later. You know, some of these are the grants I'm going to introduce you to are very competitive. Some of them are actually, you know, a good number of people are successful when they apply for them. So then kind of my next question is, you know, what can I do with grant money? And there's several different types of grants that fund different kinds of things. One of the big ones is projects. So if you have some kind of project in mind at your school, a grant could fund that. If you want to develop some kind of new programming, a grant could also support that. If you need certain kinds of materials for your classroom or musical instruments, there's certainly grants for that. Let's say you want to go to a summer program to enhance your pedagogy. There's professional development grants that you could receive for that. Let's say you want to get some music software for your classroom. There's technology grants that you can apply for to trip out your classroom with the latest in music technology. And then last, there's grants that allow you to take your students on field trips. So if you want to fund a field trip to go visit someplace cool with your students, there's actually grants for that. So kind of the 6 categories that I'm going to introduce you to for grants for today are projects, programs, materials/instruments, professional development, technology, and trips. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the types of grants that are out there. So I'm going to ask you guys to kind of take a second and just kind of think, and I know Dr. Holmes Davis, you're working in university. However, let's think back to your days when you were teaching high school band. And I want both you and Sherry to maybe think for a second, like if the sky was the limit, what's something cool you would like to do with your students that in your current situation, you really can't do? Think about it for a moment.
I can't necessarily speak to the band world anymore because I've been doing this for what, 8 years?
Long time.
Yeah. But in my current situation, I was able to get my adaptive one-handed clarinet through grant money. And this year, I was able to fund a student worker position to help me work with the Center for Music Education, social media specifically.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Could you tell us for the adaptive instrument grant, what did you need to submit as part of the application?
I submitted the information on the instrument itself
Mm-hmm.
and, kind of on my disability and my need for the instrument. And I think a primary thing is what was I planning to do and how would that bring benefit to me and also how would that bring benefit to the grant funder?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. What about you, Sherry? Have you thought about any kind of project that you would love to do or a program you'd like to bring to your school or some kind of technology you'd like to have? Dr. HD, could you hear me? It looks like my screen might have frozen up.
Nope, you're good from this end.
Okay. Can you hear me, Sherry? Okay, she may not be able to hear me. Sherry, if you can hear me, just pop into the chat.
Yes.
Always put your information there.
Yes.
Okay.
She responded.
Oh, hi, Sherry. Go ahead.
Hi.
Do you want me to say the question again?
Yes.
Sure. So the question is basically like, what's some kind of program or technology or something that you would love to do or have in your classroom that you really currently cannot do because the funding or resources are unavailable? Like if the sky was the limit, what project or program might you imagine for your students?
I would like a smart board in my classroom.
Okay. All right. Dr. HD, do you know how much a smart board costs? I actually don't know.
No, I never had a choice. The schools generally decided that we were all getting a smart board, and then you got one whether you wanted one or not. So I never had to deal with that price.
Gotcha. I myself remember the days of chalk, but the smart board. Okay. So now I'm going to introduce you to a resource. If you give me 1 second, I'm going to place a Dropmark link in the chat for our WebEx meeting. And what I'm going to ask you all to do is, oops, hold on 1 sec. I'm trying to get that link. Okay. I'm going to post it in the chat box. And if you go in there, you're going to see it's a Dropbox, and there's a document that you could download onto your computer. And that document looks something like this. Dr. HG, could you share, could I share my screen?
You should be able to.
Okay. This browser does not support sharing.
So send it to me and I'll share it.
So I sent the Dropmark link. You should be able to download it and then share your screen.
I don't see it in the chat yet. Try one more time.
Oh, sure. I just sent it.
I got it.
And Sherry, you could go ahead and download that as well, because you'll want to be able, you might want to look at parts of it that are not viewable on the screen. So let me explain what you're looking at. So I'll be honest, in my experience working at Georgia College, I've spent a lot of time seeking grants for faculty and staff, but K through 12 educators is kind of there's a different set of grants out there that are specifically geared towards educators teaching in primary and secondary schools. So what did I do? I did a little bit of research. And what I tried to do was find some of the most popular grants that teachers can apply for. And if you scroll down this list, you'll see there's different types of options here. Now, I did include some crowdfunding platforms that are specifically geared towards educators, but the majority of what you see here are grants. And what I've indicated here, you've got several columns, and let me explain what those are. On the far left, I have the title of the grant. The next column over, I list what the grant funding body is. Then the C column lists the upper amount of money that you could get from the grant. So in other words, if it says $5,000, that's the most you could get from the grant, but there's usually a range, like $1,500 to $5,000 or something like that. So I put the upper limit of what the grant offers. Then in the next column over the D column, I list what types of endeavors you could use the grant money for. You'll see here there's ones for programs, for projects, for instruments, and then some types of grants allow you to pretty much do any kind of thing that you want. Then if you look over one more column over, you'll see I list whether it's a grant, a crowdfunding platform, a fundraising opportunity, or an exchange. That's when people sort of donate things that teachers could then acquire. There's only one of those, I think, on the list. The F column is where I give a brief description of what the foundation funds. And then if you go one column over from that, I give a link to the website where you could find more information, okay? So I've listed, the G column, I listed keywords that came up on the grant website. If there were no keywords available, which means it funds all different kinds of endeavors, music and otherwise, I just left it blank, okay? So now you all have access to that spreadsheet. And I know, Sherry, you mentioned a type of specific thing you'd like for your classroom. You said a smartboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you all a couple of minutes, and I want you to scroll through this sheet, and I want you to locate one or two grants that you think might be a good fit for what it is you're looking for, okay? And what I'm going to encourage you to do is not just read the short blurb that I have there. Go ahead and click the link to that grant and take a look at the webpage, look at what the eligibility requirements are, and really see if that grant is a possibility for what it is that you're looking for. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that.
Uh-oh.
You're fine.
Oh no.
You could download it, Dr. HD. It might make it a little easier.
Yeah, probably so. I just don't know if I can do that while I'm sharing my screen.
Ah, got it.
Yeah, so we'll just see what we do. I may use this.
Dr. HD, I could also put the one you want to search for. I could put a link for you in the chat.
It's all right. We'll make it work. Let's see. I tapped it wrong, I think. Break MA. Aha.
So it looks like that one currently is on hold. I've seen a few of them do this on occasion. They sort of revamp their process and they take a year off from funding anybody.
Sure. Yeah. This one looks like a better fit than the one above it, although I think the one above it might work for what I need.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be worth a shot.
Yeah.
So yeah, because what I need it to fund is a program.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's definitely a good one for programs.
Yeah.
If you're thinking also the NEH ones also are very good for funding programs as well. And there's a couple of different options.
Sure. So the NEH ones I've researched said they were matching. Does NEH have funds that are not matching? Because the problem there, if the university has to come out of pocket 10,000, they might as well fund what I'm trying to do anyway.
You're not wrong. I don't believe the NEH ones that I posted here, I don't believe they are matching.
Okay.
But you're right. Some of them they do require like corporate matching or what have you. Yeah, that's kind of how they get you. But again, like that's something, I think, anytime you see an opportunity, obviously really carefully reading the eligibility requirements, because it does in the eligibility section inform you of whether, there's kind of work on your part to find the matching funds for something. Sherry, were you able to find an opportunity that you think might be a fit for your smartboard?
Hi, I'm sorry, I didn't. I'm mobile, so I
Oh,
wasn't able to click and
oh,
scroll.
no worries. No
So,
worries.
okay, can you email me the information, the links?
I
Yeah,
will.
I could send it to you right now. Give me one.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I'll put her email in the chat for you.
Thanks, HD.
Actually, let me stop sharing my screen first.
Okay, let's see. Okay, Sherry, I just sent it to you. So yeah, going back to, hold on, let me get back to my screen here. So going back to this spreadsheet. So you have a link to the Dropbox where the spreadsheet is. The reason I give you a link to the Dropmark is because I could continually update it, and I'll include the most updated version in that Dropmark box for you. And I encourage you to take a look on there. I tried to be mindful of finding grants that were for different types of projects or programs. I also made a point of looking for ones where there's quite a range in terms of how much money is provided. They range from about $500 to about $35,000, the ones that I found. So I encourage you to look. I mean, obviously, sort of the process for applying tends to be, doesn't always correlate, but usually when we're talking about a small amount of money, the application process is relatively straightforward and short. Whereas for the more substantial grants, yes, it does require gathering a good amount of paperwork. It requires a detailed budget. Sometimes it includes a 10-page proposal, and the list goes on in terms of other requirements. So a lot of it just kind of depends on what kind of funding you're looking for. But yes, the process can be somewhat time consuming. But another thing I'll throw out there is, when we're talking about grants, there's certain components that are always going to come up as part of the grant proposal projects. There's always going to be a section that asks for an overview of your project. There's always going to be a section that asks for the work plan. They're always going to ask for a timeline, and they're always going to ask for some type of budget. So what you may find is, if you take the time to put together an application for one grant, that the application materials only need a little bit of tweaking to then be submitted for another grant. So kind of keep that in mind if you decide to embark on this process, that yes, when you're kind of making that initial application, it can take a good amount of time. But once you kind of get used to figuring out, here's my project, here's what I want to accomplish, here's what it's going to cost, you could apply for funding for multiple different organizations. And the ones I've looked at, they don't have any sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, they won't fund you if you have funding from another source. Actually, in a lot of instances, they like to see that you applied for different grants, that you have other streams of revenue for your project, because they see it as a more viable project. Again, this is kind of something you need to look at in the eligibility requirements. So that kind of leads me to the sort of the next question here, and that is, what makes a strong application? So to kind of talk a little bit about this, I'm actually going to share with you an application that I just recently submitted for a grant, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and about the process. So Dr. HD, could you please open, I'm going to send you another link, could you please screen share this page for me?
Yes.
Thank you. So let me tell you a little bit about my project. So in my job working at Georgia College, each year I've put on a concert as part of the Constitution Week festivities at Georgia College. Now, my primary area of research is music in U.S. presidential campaigns. So I always enjoyed doing these concerts every year because it was a chance to perform songs that were sung in presidential campaigns 150 years ago that nobody has really heard since then, except for at my concerts. So that's kind of my claim to fame, if you will. So after doing many years of these concerts, I kind of came to the conclusion that, wouldn't it be great to stimulate interest in historical campaign music by creating a recording and educational resources that K through 12 teachers could use to really teach students in their classrooms about the role sound could play in persuasion. Okay, so that was kind of the concept and the project and the idea. So I knew if I wanted to do this project, I was going to have to get some kind of grant, because obviously to make a professional recording, to design a website, to hire people to work to develop the content for the website, all of those things cost money. Okay. So what I've done this fall is I've actually applied for several grants for different parts of the project to get the money that I need to make this happen. So the Hamsong Education Fellowship in American Song, this is a fellowship that's actually open not just to college professors, but also to K through 12 teachers as well. And basically the foundation exists to promote the study of American song in all its many iterations. So I decided that since campaign songs are American songs, that this would be a really cool grant to apply for. And I did. Dr. HD, if you would scroll down, and you'll see here on this website, it lists the different requirements. It first lists like what the grant funds. Then if you go down a little bit more, it tells you what you need to submit in order to apply. And here you'll see some of the kind of standard things any type of grant proposal will typically ask for. So number one, a general description of the project. They usually give you a word limit because, well, if they're going to read 500 applications, they probably don't want to read 520,000 word applications because it would take too long. So they usually give you for each section a word limit. And it's the same for even large grants like Fulbright or ACLS. There's always some kind of word limit. So the first one's a general description of the project. It says here, this should describe the relationship of the research to your scholarship, teaching, and or creative work, the intellectual rationale, the expected outcome, and the significance of the results to the study and dissemination of American music. Number two, a plan of work, also not to exceed 500 words. This should describe the various components of the planning and preparation of the project to be undertaken with the fellowship funds and a timetable. So plan of work and timetable is number two. Number three, a budget. And number four, not all grants ask for this, but some do. Some will ask you to provide a letter from a peer that basically attests to the importance or the significance of the project that you are proposing. So they want some kind of validation from another professional in your field that, like, yes, this is a good project that needs to be funded. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to pull up, Dr. HD, I'm going to have to send this to you as a link because I cannot share my screen. Give me 1 second. Let's see here. New email, Dr. HD.
Are you emailing or chatting it?
I'm going to email it to you if that's okay.
That's fine. To my Bobcats?
Yes. Okay, so I just sent it to you.
It's taking a minute to come through. Oh, wait, there it is.
Okay, so what Dr. HD is showing on the screen is the proposal that I submitted for this particular grant award. What I'd like to do, and you don't need to read this word for word, is I'm going to kind of go through the main components here and talk about what I feel makes for a compelling application. So my particular proposal is for a project. Now, obviously, if you were developing a program or if you were looking for technology or musical instruments, it would take a slightly different form, but I think there's some things that kind of hold true across these different types of applications. Number one, I think it's important that you convey that you're knowledgeable about the topic you're proposing, but I think more importantly, your project needs to come across as both innovative and exciting, is fun, is interesting, right? So keep in mind, I'm asking for money to create resources for educators. So whoever's reading this proposal needs to say, oh yeah, you know, this is something that educators don't currently have that they need to have. So you'll see here in the project description, I try to make the point that, you know what, music has been a part of presidential campaigns for a really long time. This is an important part of our nation's history. It's an important part of our musical history. And it's something that we don't currently have the resources to teach in the public schools. So then I go on to say, like, well, why is this important? Well, because right now there's like a lot of talk about different ways presidential candidates use sound to persuade people. So wouldn't it make sense for students to understand how historically music has worked in this capacity? Okay. So Dr. H, if you could scroll down just a little bit more, you'll see that I make the point that, yes, there's a lot of research in this area, but what resources are there available for teachers to teach it? There really is none. Okay. So I make the case that, well, if we want to stimulate interest in this topic, we need something that we don't currently have. What we don't currently have is a lot of recordings of this music. And in my opinion, it would be really hard to teach students about the history of campaign music if you can't play a recording for that. Okay. So what I'm asking for in this grant is not the money to actually fund the recording, because you'll see later in this proposal, I already have money to make the recording. What I don't have money for is to create a really wonderful website where the teachers could go to learn about this topic and download educational materials. So you'll see here under work plan, I talk a little bit about the process of creating this project, that there will be an archival research component, that will be creating modern editions of the music for performance, that will develop educational resources around the selections that we choose, that will have a professional recording that will be openly free and accessible, that will create a website where all these materials will be housed, and that will disseminate all these materials via a website. So then I give a little bit more of a detailed description of what takes place in every step. And then you'll see, if you scroll down a little bit more, Dr. HD, I give a timeline of the different parts of the project. And then the last thing you'll see here is I give a budget, and I'm specific about what the money I would receive from this grant will be used for. Okay. So kind of to go back to an overview here, I think, to have a successful application, you need to come across as knowledgeable about your topic. And that means, as an educator, for example, if you want to request a smart board for your classroom, if I were you, I would cite literature that specifically says this is a resource that enhances the student's learning experience. Does it enhance their retention of material? Does it somehow promote creativity? I would actually cite the literature that says this is something that every classroom really should have. Okay. And then the person who's reading it is like, oh, well, if this is something that's going to make for a better learning environment and a better experience for the students, like, yes, this is something this person needs to have. So it's kind of up to the person writing the grant to educate the people that are reading it and to convince them that this is a worthwhile endeavor. Okay. So I think the other thing you could do, since we are all music teachers here, I guess I have a sense of how a smart board would be used in like a history classroom, but I don't really quite know a lot about how it might be used in a music classroom. And what you have in mind for how to use it might be different than how someone else uses it. So I think it's important to get the folks that are reading it really excited about your idea and to clearly communicate that. Another kind of step that I think is important in this procedure, when I wrote my application for the grant, I actually had a colleague who was applying with me read through it. Then I had another colleague read through it, and then I made more revisions, and then I actually had somebody copy edit the document. So I didn't just sort of draft it and send what I had initially. I let other people read it. And I said, hey, it was the idea I'm communicating. Is this clear? What would you recommend I change? I think sometimes the more sets of eyes you have on something, the better off you'll be. Because often, we know our work so well. We feel passionate about what we want to ask for. But, sometimes we're not always filling in all the blanks because we already understand why a smart board is important. I already understand why people need to know about political music. But in a grant, it's all about your ability to effectively communicate that to the party that's reading the grant. So kind of all things that I think are important. One of the most important ones is talking to other people and letting them review your proposal. The last thing to think about when it comes to grants, and you'll notice in looking at a lot of these, we all know as teachers, no one man is an island. The teaching is very much like a collaborative activity. And I think another important part of applying for grants is figuring out who your collaborators are going to be. I think, sometimes, it's easy to just kind of see ourselves in sort of this equation of bringing new programming or new ideas to a school. But I think getting other people on board, finding other collaborators within your institution, within the community, could make for all the more compelling proposal. In the project I just did, I certainly could have done it myself, but I thought, well, I don't have as much experience with training singers and preparing singers, so it made sense for me to collaborate with a choral director on my project. I also kind of thought, well, my institution really prioritizes undergraduate research. So how can I use students as collaborators on this project? And I think I tell a more compelling story because the people on the other end reading it see that it's not just, kind of me and my battle to get people to be interested in this topic, that there's a large community of researchers and performers that I'm already bringing together to really put this thing together and make it work. And I think that also makes for a more compelling proposal. So clearly expressing your ideas with enthusiasm, highlighting what's innovative about your particular endeavor, making sure you read and reread and circulate your material, and then last, finding collaborators to work with you. So what questions do you have about this process that I can answer for you?
Can I use your application as a model for my current proposal that I'm working on now?
Absolutely, yes. And I'm happy to put that in the Dropbox for anyone to see. Yeah. Now keep in mind, that proposal has not won anything yet. However, it's very similar to an earlier proposal that was successful. So I think I feel confident that it's a good model for this kind of work. And I'm happy for you to use that model, Dr. HD. I'm also happy to provide other examples. Other questions? Yes, Dr. HG.
Sorry, I was trying to give you a thumbs up and I hit the wrong button.
Okay. So if there's no other questions, I'll just kind of circle back to some of the ideas I mentioned, kind of right from the outset. And, I think especially post-COVID, it's, very easy to become insular in a way and let our ideas kind of become stagnant because we're in survival mode, or we were in survival mode for a really long time. And I think there's a lot of different avenues one could take to step out of it and sort of come up with new ideas and forge new paths in your teaching, and engage the students in new and interesting and exciting ways. I encourage you, as we kind of step out of COVID into whatever comes next, to really consider applying for grants as a part of that process for many of the reasons that I've already stated. Whether you're working on, increasing your own professional profile and the visibility of both you as an educator and your department, I think grants could be useful for that. Whether you're looking for collaborators or community partners, grant writing could really kind of stimulate those kinds of connections. And I think most importantly of all, grants provide new opportunities for students. It's opportunities to have resources they maybe wouldn't normally have, or experiences they wouldn't normally have. And I think, just as as educators, we constantly need to be kind of rethinking our pedagogy and kind of honing what we do and kind of making things better. We want to constantly feed the students with new experiences and new ideas. And I think grants are a really excellent avenue to doing that. At the same time, I do kind of recognize that, as educators, and I don't know, Cher, if you're currently enrolled in the program here, we all have families and other commitments. And, when we do have free time, we may apply for grants that we don't get, and that's labor that we don't get back. However, I think, when I work with faculty on grants, of course I want them to win, but I really think there's a lot of value even in the process of grant writing because I think it forces you to put your ideas to paper. It forces you to own your ideas in a way, and it forces you to kind of make it real and make it, I don't know, make it very vital to you in a way if you put it on paper versus kind of leaving it in your head. So even if you don't get a grant, I think there is some value in saying, you know what, here's what I believe as a teacher. Here's the resources that I'm seeking. You know, and you may not receive the first grant you apply for. You may not get what you need right now, but you have a vision in your mind that I think could guide you in the future and help you as you move forward in your career. And we all know, you know, education is dynamic, it's changing. You know, what you may not be able to do now, you may be able to do it 5 years from now. But grants give us the seed. It gives us a place to start that eventually I think could lead to really exciting possibilities for both the educator and for the students you work with as well. Any other questions? No? Anything else from you, Dr. HD?
No, I think I'm good. I've been trying to identify grant sources for the Center for Music Education. And so I think you've given me some new ideas that I didn't have before. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we could talk more about, you know, if you locate some opportunities you're interested in, we certainly could talk more about that. Actually, in the process of like looking at the grants, I found a couple that could be used for music therapy. That Fender Play Foundation, like they specifically mentioned music therapy. So I was thinking about reaching out to Dr. Peebles and Ms. Whipple about that. And I'm happy, you know, as I see things, you know, I'm happy to assist you with that. Are there specific things you want for the center, or is it a program, a program or a project?
Actually, yes, I have a budget. We're looking for a student worker position, which I was able to fund temporarily through a CEDAL grant for fall.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, our money ran out this semester, so I'm looking for a mass comm student for the spring semester to continue. We actually, the composition competition went really well, but we want to fund that moving forward because this year I'm using my music education budget to fund the winning scholarship.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and then Bobcat Keys is going really well, and we had a corporate sponsorship the last time we ran it, but I don't know if that corporate sponsorship's going to continue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good to know. Yeah, I could definitely think about some of these things. Yeah, and see if there's some possibilities for you. The student worker one is a little bit tougher. Um, you know, I kind of wonder if you might be able to get involved. Do you know the VIP initiative here that I'm involved with? Are you aware of that?
I am not.
Okay. So VIP stands for Vertically Integrated Projects. And GCSU got a large grant to get involved in this initiative. And basically, what it is it allows students to take undergraduate research as a class. And students could take it multiple semesters. So you could recruit people coming in as freshmen, and they presumably could work with you for their 4 years. Now, you couldn't just have students on that project do clerical work for the center, but involvement with the center can be one component of what they do in addition to their research with you. Because if they're music education majors, I would think helping develop programming for the center is certainly aligned with what they're doing in their degree program. So to kind of give you an example, I run a VIP with Tracks on the Trail now. And yes, the students do track and catalog music on the campaign trail. But they also are involved in organizing the Constitution Week concert. They're also doing the research for the project I applied for with the recording of the 19th century music. One of them is going to be curating a museum exhibit. Another one's presenting a paper. They're collectively presenting on Research Day a presentation. So there's like all different kinds of projects they're doing within the context of the VIP. But again, what's cool about it is you don't have to worry about consistently applying for funding because the students, you'd presumably have students in your research class every semester, and assisting with the Center for Music Education could be part of their charge.
That would be great. And then I could just apply for grant funding for these other initiatives.
Correct. Yes.
Outstanding. All right, then we will talk more about that.
a link to that.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
It looks like Sherry's in the chat said that she's good.
Okay.
Um,
Glad you attended today, Sharon. If you have any questions, feel free to follow up with me.
yeah. And you can, Sherry, you can send me an email through the center, and I will forward you on to Dr. GM if you do have questions so that you can interact with her directly. All right. Do you have anything else for us? Thank you, Dr. Gorzlani-Mastak.
I think that's all. Thanks.
Right, well, thank you so much, and we look forward to programming more of your useful. You did last year for us. You did interviewing and resume writing, and so we look forward to more interactions with you on these matters.
I look forward to it. I gotta dream up what I'm gonna do next year.
All right. Well, have a good one.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.